We're back in the Gemeinde house. We have 1 hour, as I said, to make 5 different things. We're going to start with the cakes, and then we'll do the pies last. I do the pies last because I want the filling to be in the pie crust for as short a time as possible. The longer the filling is in the crust, the more likely the chance that it's going to turn soggy. We don't want that. We want a light, flaky crust. So pies last, cakes first. And the first cake we're going to make is Bertha Hick's crumb cake. Bertha Hick is a Pennsylvania Dutch woman who lives down in Lebanon County, just south of us. She and I used to bake at an historic site called the Alexander Schaefer Homestead in Schaeferstown. The unique thing about that property is that the homestead itself, which dates to the 1740s, has a magnificent and a huge interior bake oven. The bake oven is actually inside the house and is connected into the fireplace. I would be baking in there, but the property has a second bake oven in the summer kitchen across the creek. That's where Bertha would be baking her crumb cake. And she gave me the recipe. She's very good at sharing recipes. We should all be very good at sharing recipes. Recipes are meant to be shared. Okay? There's nothing secret or private about it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with 3 cups of unbleached pastry flour, 2 cups of sugar, a ½ cup of softened butter. So we're going to put that in, we're going to use this mixing bowl, 3 cups of unbleached pastry flour, I guess you could sift this, but I haven't sifted anything for 25 years. One cup of sugar, 2 cups of sugar. Now, the ½ cup of butter. Here we go. I had to soften this in the microwave. We actually have a microwave now. We actually have electricity now. All that is amazing, and all that is fairly new. We're going to make a crumble mixture out of this, just as Christian showed you with the pie crust and as I showed you with the topping for the pies. First of all, though, I'm going to wash my hands over here. They're very sooty from working with the fireplace. I don't think Julia Child ever had soot on her hands from her bake oven, but she would have had. She'd had one. Okay. You simply crumble them together. Mixing it up. Getting the crumbles fairly fine so there aren't any large lumps of butter, but because the butter is already softened, we're not going to have any trouble with large lumps of butter. Now, because it's called a crumb cake, that means we're going to save out a small amount of crumbs, a couple of tablespoons actually, to the side. And we're going to put that on last. Rinse off my hands again. I'm going to set my minute timer so we'll know when to go up and get out the bread. It'll also help keep me on task. B-O-T, Baker's on Task. Now, to continue with Bertha's cake, we're going to take 2 eggs. And I'm going to break each one, first of all, separately in a cup. We have our own chicken eggs. And because we keep them for some time before we get around to using them, I want to make sure that each egg is good, meaning that the yolk is contained, is solid, and is not mixed in with the white, and that the smell is very fresh. This one is good. So we're going to put that in a separate bowl. These eggs are pretty good. They were laid within the past week or so. Sometimes we don't get around to using eggs for several weeks, and then you want to make sure. Bad one, very bad, very, 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 very bad. That's why we do it this. That's why we do it this way. You can smell it. You can probably smell it wherever you're sitting. That was rough. And I was just talking about how fresh our eggs were. That one was not a fresh egg. Well, that's why we do this. We'll try another one here. Perfect. Smells good, looks good. I was doing a baking demonstration and a Polish man came up to me, watched me separating the eggs before I put them into the batter, and was very impressed and surprised to see that I was demonstrating Polish baking. Well, I didn't realize that I was demonstrating Polish baking, but it happened to be the way his people tested their eggs on their farm. And I explained it's not just a Polish thing or a Pennsylvania Dutch thing, it's a smart thing and a practical thing. Now, 1 cup buttermilk or sour milk, in this case buttermilk. I'm going to mix it up, breaking the yolks so that we can get the entire egg mixed into the liquid. We need 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And in this case, I'm using apple cider vinegar. You can tell by the color. I prefer this to distilled vinegar, the white vinegar. It's not as acidic, and it's much closer to homemade vinegar. The farms around here, many of them, you go to an auction, sometimes you can still see a vinegar barrel and smell the vinegar barrel where they actually stored and made their vinegar from their apple cider. Also, the fact that this uses vinegar as a flavoring instead of vanilla indicates the age of this recipe. It comes from a time when vanilla, in any form, was simply not available on rural farms like this. They would be using things like vinegar to flavor their cakes. The advent of bottled vanilla extract is very much, I would say, a late 19th century thing. In the rural areas here, probably early 20th century. So we have the liquid. We're going to pour it into the dried batter, the dried flour. We're going to mix it up. This makes a very thick batter. In fact, I was surprised the first time I made it. I was sure that it was wrong. I was sure that Bertha didn't know what she was doing because it's so thick. I said, this will never bake. But it did, and we'll see. We'll see how well it works. It is a very dense cake. Pennsylvania Dutch cakes often, in fact, typically have no icing. It's a breakfast cake, or cake they could actually take by the chunk out into the field and eat during the day. The icing is superfluous. It's simply a cake that you can dunk if you do anything at all. Now, one other thing I need, let's see. Yes, I need a teaspoon of baking soda, and this time her recipe doesn't call for it to be added in water. So we're just going to put it right in to the batter. Typically I press out any lumps that might be in it. There we go. Mix it up. Now, because this cake is so dense, the batter is so dense, you have to bake it in the right type of mold The traditional mold they would use would be what's called a Turk's head mold. This is pottery. The Turk's head comes from the centered cone that at some point reminded someone of a Turkish hat. I don't use the pottery ones because I'm afraid that they might crack in the baking or I might drop them too. So I use the 19th century equivalent, and indeed 20th century equivalent, of the tin Turk's head mold. I guess these should be called bunt pans. I'm not sure if there's another name for these or not, but basically it's a metal adaptation of a Turk's head mold. We're going to butter and flour it. Okay, we're going to use this type of pan for all of our cakes today. I just find it makes a better cake, better in the sense of being cooked through and through without areas of just raw batter. We smear it around, get some flour on it. Now we're going to put the batter into the mold. Again, you can see how remarkably heavy and dense this is. It doesn't pour. This is not a pouring batter. May need a little help with the forefinger. Try and get out as much as we can here. And then you want to even it out, flatten it down a little bit. Taste it, always taste it. Good, good. Now, remember it's called a crumb cake, and we kept out some crumbs, so now we're going to sprinkle them on top. You'll see how these brown nicely, and they actually stay separate from the actual cake. I'm not going to use all that I made. I just want to make basically a light dusting of crumbs on there. Now, I'm going to step off camera and set this aside, and I'll be right back.